Hi, my name is Meadow Ging-Wargo, and my project is on sewing stitches and their strengths. So my question is, which stitch is the strongest, and if there's a pattern that indicates how strong each stitch will be. And throughout this experiment, I will be using the sewing machine for all the stitches. My prediction is I think that the wider the stitch, the stronger it will be, and the reason why I think that is because I think that the thread will be able to hold on to more areas if it's wider, and if it was skinnier, it wouldn't be able to hold on to as much, so I think the wider it will be, the stronger it will be. The reason why I chose to do this on sewing is I love sewing and I wanted to see which stitch is the strongest so I can get the best quality out of my project. And I have my own sewing business and quality is a big part of it. So the materials that I used were fabric, thread, weights, a rope, a clip, a pulley system, and some mats. So the first thing I did was I attached a pulley system to a beam, and as you can see, the arrow is pointing to the pulley system. Then I attached sewed pieces to the pulley system, which I'll later on explain. Then I added a clip to the material. Then I attached a rope to the clip and the weights. And then I added mats on the floor because if there wasn't mats on the floor and all this weight were to fall, that'd crack the cement, which would be a bad thing. So whenever I put the mats down, it prevents that from happening. So back to the tested piece of material. It's an 11 by 3.5 inch rectangle, and I sewed down the middle of it with one type of stitch. And there's 9 different types of stitches that I'm using, so I have 9 different pieces of material to test. There is 17 different stitches on the sewing machine, but I'm only going to use 9, partially because I've never used the bottom stitches and they are very complicated, and I think that the top ones are more basic and easier to understand and compare. This is a close-up picture of one of the tested pieces of material, and as you can see, there is one stitch down the middle of it. And then these are the 9 other pieces of material that I'll be testing. So these are some pictures from my actual experiment. In this picture, you can see that I am cranking up the weights, and the reason why I do that is because I don't want the weights to be on the floor because I won't get an accurate test. This is a picture of the way that the fabric is placed, and as you can see, the stitches are on the clip because right below the clip is the weights, and I want the fabric to snap at the stitches, and that's where most of the weight will be. And then this is just a picture of the whole thing itself, and in the background you can see that there's the different types of weights. And now this might not seem like it takes a long time to add the weight on, but it actually takes a long time because I'm adding 2.5 pounds at a time, and when it goes past 100 pounds it actually takes a long time. Yeah, I have 9 of them to use. In this video, you can see that I am adding the weights on in the background, but make sure you look at the fabric and the stitches. Now that might not seem very scary, but whenever you're right there, it is very, very scary. It is very loud whenever it falls, and there is like 100 pounds on there. So if 100 pounds were to fall on your foot or your hand, it would really cause you to get really injured. So you got to be very, very careful at all times. And then this is the tested fabric in the end, and you can see that it ripped on the stitches, and then on the left you can see that the weights have just fallen, and that's the ripped piece of material, and on the right there's the 9 different pieces of material after they are done being experimented on. This is a table that shows the stitch and how much weight it held and then it snapped on. And then on the left, you can also see the picture of the sewing machine stitches, and then you can see if you can find a pattern within the stitches and how much weight it held. And then this is a bar graph of how much weight each stitch held, which this only answers part of my question. It answers that C is the strongest stitch out of all of them. It held 160 pounds, but it does not answer if there's a pattern. So I decided that I would put the stitches in order, because on the sewing machine, those stitches are not in order. It's just the way the sewing machine puts it down. So I decided that I'd list them least to greatest by their width. So I did that with a caliper, and I measured the width of each stitch, and you can look at the arrows and see how I measured it. On the left, you can see that I listed the width of each stitch, and then on the right, I listed it least to greatest with 1 being the least and 9 being the greatest. And then I made a bar graph of that, and there still really is not a pattern within that. So then I decided that I would do weight versus stitch width, and you still do not see any pattern within that. So then I decided that I'd measure how much thread I used. So the first thing I did was I unwound the thread and I marked it by 2 centimeters, and I wound it back up, and then I sewed down the middle with the different stitches, and the material was 3 inches wide, so I sewed 3 inches, and then I counted the amount of dots there on each stitch. It might be hard for you to see there, but I tried pointing them out, the marked dots, but in person they're easier to see. So I counted all the dots I found, and then multiplied it by 2 because I marked it by 2 centimeters each. And then here's the bar graph of that. And I really did not see any pattern. So then I decided that I would do thread length versus the weight. And you can see that there is a pattern. So the more thread that you use, the stronger it'll be. But what these 2 stitches? And then I looked at those and I found out that those stitches do use more thread, but I think they're more for decoration than they are for actually having strength and being able to hold weight. So in conclusion, at the end of this project, I could tell that C was the strongest stitch out of all of them, which held 160 pounds. And then I also found out that the more thread in each stitch increases its strength and how much weight it can hold. So that was the pattern within all of these different stitches. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Is there any questions?